God have mercy on me, Christopher whispered, making his way down the noisy hallway filled with chatter. It's been too long, almost a week, you know? Surprised yet? Two massive hands suddenly grabbed him from behind, slamming him hard into a locker. His books crashed to the floor with a loud thud, and he looked at the person opposite him like a deer caught in headlights. It's been almost a week. I was just thinking about it. So, you knew it was coming, didn't you, Christopher? The other guy's friends stood by, laughing loudly, while other students casually walked past, completely unconcerned. Buzz, leave me alone. You've had your rest, Chrissy. He ruffled Christopher's hair. Almost a week, remember? Christopher said nothing, accepting defeat. Damn it, Christopher seethed, feeling suffocated. His body was pressed tightly against the cold metal inside the locker. The only light that seeped in was through 3 small vents near the top. Otherwise, everything inside the locker was swallowed by darkness. His legs had lost all feeling of pain after standing for 55 minutes, waiting for class to end or for someone from school security to find him. This had happened so many times that he was used to it. However, his grades were starting to drop. The classes he missed because of these lock-ins affected his GPA. He refused to think about it while trapped in the locker. Thinking about it only made him angrier. Every day I'm locked in this damn locker, he gritted his teeth. I'm sick of it, A dark shadow passed over the vents on the locker, blocking the light. It didn't move. He felt a gaze piercing through the locker's metal. There was no reply. After a moment, discomfort turned into fear. A small piece of paper was pushed through the vent, hitting his chest. He snatched it before it fell to the floor. If it fell to the bottom of the locker, he wouldn't be able to pick it up. The shadow disappeared immediately afterward. What the hell? He stared at the small piece of paper in his hand. Hey, someone, he called out. Open this damn locker, but no one answered. Bastards, Christopher muttered. What is this, a love letter? He opened the paper. The first thing he noticed was the horribly messy handwriting. It was almost illegible, written in bold black ink. It made him a little uneasy. The way the letters were formed somehow looked angry to him. Perhaps it was the sharp, jagged strokes like speech bubbles in a comic book. Aren't you tired of this? They bully you constantly, but I understand. Ed asterisk. Christopher felt anxious holding the paper in the faint, dusty light of the locker. He carefully read the words. Ed. Who is Ed? Eddie Braxton? Why would he do that? And he doesn't call himself Ed. He felt a sense of gloom. What did those words mean? Who had just stood outside the locker, momentarily blocking the light? Who was Ed, and what did he truly understand? A shiver ran down his spine as he looked at the paper one last time, then folded it and put it in his pocket. Christopher, a sudden voice startled him. Mr. Tier, he sighed in relief, you scared me. They locked you in the locker again, huh? The janitor asked angrily. Someone needs to stop those kids, he said, turning the lock left and right, having memorized the code long ago. When the lock clicked open, he pulled the locker door open, looking into Christopher's deep blue eyes and long brown hair. Thank you, Christopher said, stepping out. No one ever stops them. Everything they do goes unnoticed. The principal doesn't care at all, that's why I keep getting locked in here. The janitor sighed. I'll do something about this, he said, like a familiar promise. Christopher nodded, then felt the need to ask a question. Mr. Tier, did you see anyone walk down the hall just a few minutes ago? I saw a boy, Mr. Tier replied. Not sure who he was. He walked down the hall and turned left, then I didn't see him anymore. A tall guy, looked like he wore glasses, but I'm not sure. Why? Did you ask him for help and he just walked away? Oh no, it's nothing. Thanks for saving me again, Mr. Tier. No problem. I mean it, Christopher, I'll do something. Thank you. In his dark room, Christopher lay on his bed, back against the headboard. The curtain was pulled aside, allowing enough moonlight to illuminate the room so he could read the words on the paper. Aren't you tired of this? They bully you constantly, but I understand. Ed asterisk. Ed asterisk, he wondered incessantly. Who is Ed? What do you understand? Are you bullied too? Why didn't you say anything? A chill ran down his spine again, and he decided to stop thinking about it for the night. He folded the paper, sat up, placed it on his desk, then climbed back into bed. Under the warm covers, he tried to sleep, but a strange curiosity wouldn't leave him alone. All he could think about was the moment the light in the locker was blocked, and he felt someone's gaze from outside. It haunted him. For some reason, when he thought of the presence outside the locker, he didn't feel it was a human being. It was more like an entity or a force, perhaps because the person was so strange and distant, with a name he didn't even know. He opened his eyes, staring at the ceiling, taking a long, deep breath. "I'll probably be up all night thinking about this," he sighed. "Christopher," a stern voice startled him, and his tired eyes flew open, meeting the teacher's face. "Wake up," Christopher shot up quickly, both embarrassed and anxious. "Sorry, it won't happen again." "You've missed 30 minutes of my class. I imagine your test scores tomorrow will reflect that." The teacher returned to the podium. Everyone in the class was now looking at Christopher, either smirking or looking awkward. No one looked at him with sympathy. He stared blankly at the blackboard, his eyes starting to droop again as his pounding heart slowly calmed. Christopher opened his locker. He was surprised to find a book he had never seen before inside, with a note taped to it. He picked it up, examining it carefully. It was an old notebook with a faded red cover. The pages were yellow-brown, seemingly discolored from their original bright white. He intended to open the notebook, but decided to read the note first. He peeled off the tape and opened it. "This is a gift for you. Read it carefully, but don't read it at school. You must not show this notebook to anyone. Read it when you are alone. When you are done reading, leave a note in your locker telling me your thoughts. From Ed Asterisk." He felt a little uneasy seeing the scribbled handwriting. Even the black ink of the letters looked unnatural. He placed the notebook back in the locker, following the instructions. However, curiosity quickly took over. He cautiously opened the notebook, glancing at the first page. What he saw appeared to be notes on American history. The handwriting was still the same, illegible and bold. "Something's not right here," Christopher sighed. "I don't know what it is, but something's off. How did he put it in my locker? And this notebook looks so old, like it's from the 80s or 90s. I don't like this at all." He shook his head. He put the notebook down and closed the locker. He turned around and immediately spotted Buzz walking towards him from the end of the hallway. Christopher quickly ran back to class, hoping Buzz hadn't seen him. All Christopher could hear was the ticking of the clock. The school psychologist was brewing coffee as usual, leaving Christopher alone in her office. He rested his elbows on the table, leaning his head on his hand, frustrated. "I hate these Thursday meetings," he muttered. "I have more important things to do than sit here watching her make coffee." Then the diary came to mind. Despite the somewhat creepy feeling, he was still very curious about what was inside. Every time he imagined the notebook in its bag, he felt as if Ed was nearby, watching him. Alone in the office, he tried to stop thinking about the notebook and Ed, hoping it would help him feel less anxious. 3 minutes later, the psychologist returned. She had long brown hair and caramel-colored eyes hidden behind glasses. She was in her late 20s, beautiful enough to be hard to look away from. He used to feel a pang of excitement every time he saw her walk down the hall, but now all he felt for her was contempt. Her dismissal of his problems was completely contrary to her job and her habit of blaming him when he was already furious. "Hello, Christopher," she smiled, sitting down at the table opposite him, holding a cup of coffee. "How was your day?" "I wasn't kicked or punched. I wasn't locked in a locker today either, so I guess it was fine." "Don't be so negative, Chrissy." She placed her hand on his shoulder, slightly annoyed but determined to change his mindset. "I've told you before, your negativity only makes the problem worse." He was angry but decided to stay silent, thinking that saying anything would only make things worse. "Listen, Ms. Miller, Buzz's parents donate a lot of money to the school, and Garrick High needs money." She gently stroked his arm as he looked into her eyes. His tormented soul was nothing to her careless smile. "And they're just joking around anyway. Besides, if you weren't so grumpy, I don't think people would bully you as much." "Listen, Christopher, look at it all as a life lesson. Sometimes in life, there will be bad people. You need to learn how to deal with them. Later, you'll have bosses you don't like, and..." Christopher stopped paying attention again. He was reminded once more why he hated everyone. Though he usually tried to suppress angry thoughts, whenever he sat in the school psychologist's office, they erupted. Here, he always came to dark conclusions. Today, as he tried to dismiss her meaningless words, Christopher realized that there wasn't a single person in the entire school he cared about. He began to wonder if he would care if they all died, and he lied to himself when he concluded that he wouldn't. Then he started thinking that perhaps everything would be easier if he died. Then no one could hurt him anymore or ignore him, and if they did, he wouldn't have to experience it because he wouldn't be alive. Are you listening? No one understands, asterisk, he thought to himself. Then he remembered Ed. They bully you constantly, but I understand. Christopher looked at her with disinterest. Are you even there? You know, ignoring someone who's trying to help you is rude. And Christopher stopped paying attention again, thinking more about Ed. He couldn't wait to get home to check the notebook. However, a strange, eerie feeling enveloped his mind whenever he thought about the notebook or Ed. He wondered if it was because he wasn't used to someone reaching out to him, or if the idea of a potential friend confused him. But it wasn't the usual anxious feeling. He didn't feel restless, nervous, or awkward, or like he was stepping out of his comfort zone. He felt like he was talking to a dead person, perhaps because the name Ed sounded like dead. He used to joke about this to calm his nerves, but every time he thought of Ed, he recalled the feeling of someone's presence standing mere inches from his face, separated only by the dark locker. Every time he thought of that moment, all he felt was dread. If Ed truly understood, why did he seem so scary? Then he began to think about Ed's reasons. If Ed understood Christopher's pain, it meant he too had been a victim of years of bullying and isolation, and perhaps also lacked social skills. He might have been too shy to say anything, Christopher thought, and that's why he wrote to him. He was lonely and shy, just like Christopher. In that moment, Ed almost seemed normal, as if nothing was wrong. But how did he get into his locker? The vague feeling returned, and Ed became mysterious again, like a supernatural force. Christopher, the psychologist snapped, I'm talking to you. I wasn't listening, he replied sluggishly, and she looked at him with disgust. You wonder why everyone treats you badly? You're a difficult kid, Christopher. No one respects you because you don't deserve respect. You're selfish and terrible and... Oh, I don't think your job is to insult people who lack confidence. Actually, I thought it was to help them. So either I've always misunderstood, or you're really bad at your job. He stood up as she began to rage about respect. He walked towards the door and she grabbed his arm, pulling him back. He yanked his arm free as she yelled, You just swore at me. You're getting detention. Because you just grabbed me in an aggressive way. If you want to keep your job, you should shut up the moment I walk out this door. She gritted her teeth, fuming in anger. She looked at him with contempt. He looked at her coldly, his hand raised to her face, index finger extended. Then he turned his back and walked out of the office, closing the door behind him. Christopher threw his backpack on the floor. He unzipped it, pulled out the old red notebook, making sure his door was locked. He put the note in the same drawer as the first piece of paper, then sat down at his desk. He placed the notebook in front of him. Let's begin, he whispered. Opening to the first page, he saw descriptions of the founding of America, the Revolutionary War, and the Founding Fathers, all written in the strange, bold, dark handwriting. He flipped through the notebook pages, only finding notes from a history class. It was all just notes. He scratched his head. What am I really supposed to get from this? He turned to the end of the notebook. There, he saw dozens of equations, mostly more complex than he could understand. He guessed they were calculus problems. Then something caught his attention. In the upper left corner was written, Edward F., and directly below it the date, January 1, 1991. 1991? He whispered, confused. This assignment was written in January 1991. The whole notebook looks like it's from 1991. He looked at the old, faded, yellow-brown pages. Edward Faust is your name, Ed. He held the notebook in his hands, completely bewildered, thinking that Ed had left it for him. He continued to flip through, but found very little, mostly just history notes, English notes, or equations. He noticed that Ed had an astonishingly excellent vocabulary, even in his notes. Ed used many clever words, some of which Christopher didn't even understand. Then he came across something interesting. Unlike most of the other pages, which were crammed with writing, this page was almost empty. On the page was only a poem, titled A Walk in Solitude. Christopher's deep blue eyes lingered on the stanzas. Walking through empty halls. My lonely, desolate soul shudders. Crude words echo from afar. Slipping into the darkness, a hollow sorrow. My fading self like a ghost. A decaying spirit within. Reading dirty, sprawling words. Crude philosophies etched across the walls. I thought I was merely desolate. But chaos reflected in the mirror. Dark eyes meet the abyss. Lost amidst the flow of time. Years, months like vanishing clouds. Healing countless sins, day after day. Not one more second here. Not one more moment of torment. My body longs for my heart's voice to be heard. My voice rising to blend with the clouds. Christopher held the notebook in his hand, unable to take his eyes off the poem. He had felt all of those things before. He felt as if he was reading his own thoughts, as if it was written just for him. Now he felt close to Ed. He didn't understand some of what was happening. He didn't understand the strange date in the notebook or how Ed had opened his locker, but he understood Ed. This is so strange, he thought, then remembered Ed's instructions. He sat down, took out a piece of paper, and began to write his thoughts on it. Ed's notebook was always in Christopher's backpack. He never took it out at school or in public, but he felt safe having it with him. He felt as if Ed was nearby, perhaps protecting him. He almost regarded the notebook as a good luck charm. He walked through the hallway, recalling the poem. He had unintentionally memorized it, reading it over and over, and empathizing with every line made it impossible for him to forget any word. He whispered the verses as he passed a group of students leaning against lockers, swearing without hesitation. He looked to his left, observing a bold transaction between two students in the shadow of a vending machine before they left, each slipping the received item into their jacket pocket. I wish you were here, walking these halls with me. I feel like I understand you so well, Edward Faust. It's like we're brothers. He gasped in pain as his back was slammed hard into a locker. His eyes widened in fear as Buzz appeared, laughing and holding up his phone in front of him, recording as he punched Christopher in the stomach. After 5 seconds, he released Christopher, turning to look at his phone with a smile, as if he had just played a small trick and recorded it. Send it to me. A giddy girl in his friend group laughed loudly, and Buzz replied, I will, wait a sec. Christopher gasped for breath, his stomach throbbing. He tried to walk away, but Buzz spoke up. Don't go anywhere, Christopher. He froze, waiting numbly. Not one more day, not one more hour. I will be heard. I will. These words swirled in Christopher's head, making him almost want to utter them as if they were a hymn of salvation. Buzz picked up his phone again, continuing to record as he ordered, Get in the locker, Christopher. Christopher stared at him, paying no attention to the camera. I can record myself putting you in there by hand. His friends started to roar with laughter. Don't think I can't do it with just one arm. Christopher climbed into the locker. He looked directly into the camera, with eyes full of hatred before the locker door slammed shut. Not one more day, not one more hour. I will be heard, I will. Buzz's laughter echoed through the hallway, mingling with the giggles of his friends. When he finished recording, Buzz grinned widely. I knew you'd listen. Funny, really. I just told you to get in and you did it right away. You're like my dog. Actually, that's a good idea. I'll bring a leash to school someday and make you wear it. He laughed loudly. Well, it was fun talking to you, Christopher, and hey, you don't need to thank me, for the standing practice I give you. Standing all class must be tiring for a coward like you, but now you're used to it. He high-fived a friend in his group before they all walked away. Christopher was silent. Today he wasn't angry. Today he wasn't desperate. Today he wasn't sad. Since discovering the poem in Ed's notebook, he had begun to feel in control. He felt that these were just small battles he was losing, but he would win the war. 30 minutes passed as Christopher tried to get the notebook out of his backpack to read more, but he couldn't remove his backpack from his shoulders in the cramped space, nor could he reach behind him to grab the old red notebook. Then suddenly, a shadow blocked the light slots on top of the locker. He knew who it was. His heart pounded. He was both deeply frightened and intensely grateful. He wanted to speak, but remained silent, waiting for Ed to begin. Have you read my book, Christopher? Christopher froze. Ed's voice was completely unlike what he had imagined. It was deep, dignified, powerful, and authoritative, sounding like a news anchor or a radio host. Christopher could barely breathe, as if a mythical creature he had always believed in was now standing right in front of him, undeniably. I have, but I don't understand much. I mean, I understand, but I don't know why you want me to read it. I read your poem, A Walk in Solitude. I really liked it. It's a great poem. I completely understand how you feel. Ed was silent, You haven't read the whole book. You skipped the most important part. You missed the middle. Christopher felt ashamed. Well, the beginning was all notes, so I flipped to the end to see if there was anything else. The end was all equations. I found your poem and another page that looked strange. It looked like homework and had a date from 1991. Ed didn't reply. There was a strangely long silence. However, the light still hadn't returned to the locker, meaning Ed was still standing outside. Tonight, I want you to read the middle part. It might be a little hard to understand. I apologize for my handwriting. Anyway, there's a trick to reading what I've written. You're smart, Christopher. You'll figure it out. And by the way, thank you for the compliments on my poem. Christopher replied. Yes, Ed. I'm going to open your locker now so you can get out, but you have to promise me one thing. He wanted to ask how Ed knew the locker combination, but instead he just said, yes. Don't look at me. I don't want you to come out until you count to 30. The request made him extremely confused. Okay, he heard Ed's long fingers turning the lock left and right, accompanied by clicks and clanks. Ed placed the lock on the floor. Light seeped back into the locker through the vents as Ed's footsteps echoed softly down the hall. Christopher had to try his hardest not to look after Ed. When he reached 25, he couldn't take it anymore. He opened the locker door, glancing around the hallway. Nothing. He quickly ran towards the end of the hall, turning left, following the direction Mr. Tier had described Ed taking last time. Now he saw a tall man in the distance, wearing an old blue flannel shirt. The man had short, dark hair and wore glasses. The man was very far away, in the school parking lot. Finally, he disappeared behind a van. That was Ed, Christopher whispered. I only got a glimpse, but he didn't look like someone in his 30s, but his voice was like that. He was bewildered to finally hear the voice of the ghost who had kept him awake every night. Now he could better imagine the presence outside the locker that day. He realized that Ed must be very tall if he blocked the light from the locker's vents. That meant his head was level with the top of the locker. Even Buzz wasn't that tall. He felt admiration for Ed. Ed's voice and vocabulary seemed out of place with his bad handwriting. He wished Ed had stayed, and they could have sat down and talked that day. When he got home, Christopher rushed to his room, hoping to lock the door and start reading the middle section of the red notebook. However, his mother's voice rang out, Christopher, don't run straight into your room. You have chores to do and homework too. Do you ever check your grades? It's ridiculous, just ridiculous. He sighed in frustration. Come on, Christopher. He gritted his teeth. He threw his backpack into his room, then walked into the living room where his mother was placing various cleaning chemicals on the counter. By 9:00 p.m., he finally escaped his mother's disappointed lectures and tedious tasks. He closed his bedroom door and locked it. Now, he took out the notebook. Intense curiosity mingled with a slight fear of what he was about to discover. Ed was still a mystery, and sometimes thinking about Ed made Christopher feel like he had just watched a horror movie. He wanted to know what the most important part was. He hoped it would bring clarity, explaining why Ed had approached him in the first place, and all the strange feelings he had experienced since the incident. He opened the notebook to the middle section. He saw complex drawings of something, but he couldn't recognize what it was. The drawings were incredibly precise. They looked like diagrams he saw in science books. On the page, there were lines of text interspersed among the drawings, but he couldn't read them. They looked like they were written in a different language. Ed's terrible handwriting didn't help. He meticulously studied everything, trying to understand their meaning. Then he noticed a letter. Wait, he whispered. This looks like a handwritten R backwards and upside down. Deeply intrigued, he walked to the mirror in his room. He held the notebook upside down and reversed. Now the lines of text immediately became readable. All were handwritten in cursive, and Ed's handwriting wasn't good, but he could read it. Then he realized the drawings also became easier to understand because they were drawn upside down and reversed. This looks like a bomb. He nearly dropped the notebook. He began to read the lines of text. They were lists of necessary materials and meticulously detailed instructions on how to build various types of bombs. His hands began to tremble as he held the notebook, looking through the mirror, reading Ed's Handbook of Destruction. He flipped the page and saw blueprints of a building. This is Garrick High. He recognized the 4 large buildings facing each other in a diamond shape. This is building A, that's building B and C, and this is building D, but what are all these dots? He noticed points marked on the blueprint, as if something had been designated there. He began to read the annotations. From what he understood, 3 large bombs were designated to be placed at 3 locations. One on the north side of Building A, one on the west side of Building B, and one on the east side of Building C. In addition, several smaller bombs would apparently be placed randomly throughout the school with codes like A144 and C180. He dropped the notebook to the floor, his hands shaking as he recoiled, completely horrified by what he had just read. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, his eyes fixed on the notebook as if Ed were smirking at him. "Who is he? What is he?" He closed the notebook. Its presence next to him made him uneasy. He sat down in front of his computer and typed Edward F. into Google. As soon as he typed F, Google suggested Edward Faust. He clicked on it. A picture appeared on the screen, a tall man in an old blue flannel shirt. He wore glasses, had short dark hair, and looked straight into the camera with an emotionless face. The photo looked like it was taken decades ago. Below Ed's name was the title, Failed Serial Killer. "What the hell?" he whispered, reading on. Directly below, Ed's birth and death dates were clearly stated. August 20, 1972, March 18, 1991. His heart froze completely. He stared intently into Ed's eyes on the computer screen. He was sure this was the person he had seen outside his school earlier. He clicked on the first accessible website. It was an article from 2011. 2 decades have passed since the death of arsonist and murderer Edward Faust in an event that can only be described as an act of God. Edward Faust, a senior at Garrick High School in 1991, is considered the first in modern American history to be labeled a school shooter. Although the Columbine massacre took much of the attention away from Faust, it cannot be denied that if Faust had truly carried out his plan, the devastation would have made Columbine a minor event. Christopher could barely read the words. He felt as if Ed was standing right outside his door, watching him. In a panic, he hated having Ed's notebook nearby. The majority of Edward Faust's heinous plan to destroy Garrick High School was classified by police to prevent anyone from attempting to replicate it. This led to common speculation that Faust's plan was not only too cruel for the public to know, but also so effective that it was hidden from public view. All that is known is that Faust, a bomb-making expert, planned to detonate 3 large bombs at the school, one in Building A, one in Building B, and one in Building C. However, many questions remain unanswered about the massacre that almost changed the course of America forever. First, in addition to the 3 large bombs, nearly 20 smaller bombs were also found. Their purpose in the plan remains unclear. It is believed that Faust possessed both a rifle and a pistol, but there is no direct evidence to indicate this, at least not publicly. Christopher felt as if everything around him blurred. He read on. The only and clearest answer to what would have happened that day if Edward had not died prematurely lies in a notebook confiscated by police, known as the Red Notebook. The Red Notebook was a diary in which Faust meticulously documented his plans. It also contained detailed descriptions of how to build the bombs he had made. The police seized the notebook and hid it. Since then, no. "No, it's in my room." Christopher stared at the Red Notebook. It was right next to him. Faust was known for building military-grade bombs. Unlike Columbine, where many bombs failed to detonate, Faust's bombs were believed to detonate with deadly precision. The Red Notebook was so carefully guarded precisely because of the high effectiveness of the bombs Faust created. Furthermore, it was noted that the descriptions in the notebook on how to build bombs were easy to understand, written so that anyone could build them if they followed the instructions carefully. No one outside of the police and Faust himself had ever read the Red Notebook, but it cannot be denied that knowing the details of the plan, which police judged to be sophisticated and strategically brilliant, would cause a dark curiosity. I read it. Christopher held the Red Notebook in his hands. He could barely control the powerful emotions that surged as he touched it. He was amazed that he held a piece of American history, an item that had almost changed the shape of the country forever. What happened to him? Why did his plan never come to fruition? Christopher restlessly scratched his head, scrolling to the end of the article. Faust's death was as mysterious as the words he wrote. One day in his basement, where he built all his bombs, it is believed he made a mistake while constructing an explosive. It detonated, killing him and his mother, destroying their home, and damaging surrounding houses. Initially, it was thought to be one of the large bombs he built, but it was later discovered to be a bomb much smaller than the 3 he had built and intended to place in buildings A, B, and C. This explosion prompted police to investigate, and within a week, they discovered a storage unit Faust had rented, which was filled with the bombs he had made. It is believed that the red notebook was also in that storage unit, although some speculate it was destroyed in the initial explosion, and only scattered pages of the red notebook were found in the storage unit. The bombs were quickly confiscated by police and hidden from the public, although a photograph was taken when the bombs were transported from the scene by a reporter who sneaked into the restricted area. The photo is below. He looked at the picture. It was blurry and of very poor quality. A police officer stood near the camera, hand blocking the lens, but in the background, a truck was still visible with 3 tall, terrifying bombs in its bed. They looked identical to the drawings he had seen in the red notebook. He guessed that the smaller bombs were also in the truck, but they were too small to see from the flatbed. Initially, police objected to the photo's release, but years later, they allowed it to be made public after receiving hundreds of requests from Garrick Town residents who wanted to see with their own eyes the weapons that had almost claimed their lives. To date, major tragedies have occurred. 9/11, Columbine, and Sandy Hook are just a few examples. But what is certain is that if things had not gone differently in March 1991, the name Garrick High would be a word none of us growing up in America would ever forget. Christopher pressed the back button. His eyes met Ed's eyes on the screen again. He's dead, but he's not dead. He came to my school. He gave me the red notebook. He talked to me. Christopher's entire body trembled. He knew everything was real, but still felt like he was trapped in a prolonged nightmare or a terrifying hallucination. He reopened the red notebook. He looked at the bold black ink, imagining Ed sitting in his basement, planning the massacre of hundreds of students, teachers, and civilians. Not one more day, not one more hour, I will be heard. I will. Christopher whispered those words. They all made sense now. What disgusted him was that he began to feel honored. He chose me to carry out his plan, his great plan. He chose me. He's like me. His own words scared him. He tried to stop thinking about it, but couldn't resist. Ed sees everyone as an enemy except me. He trusts me with the red notebook. He came to my locker. He opened it for me. He began to think about the first day Ed appeared, a serial killer truly standing outside his locker, not saying a word, blocking the light. He was horrified by Ed. He was fascinated by Ed, and he respected Ed. I can do what he intended to do. I can do it. No one knows the whole plan, but it's all here. I can read it all and know what no one else knows. I can be remembered forever. Ed and we will be written into history. He bit his tongue hard. What the hell am I saying? He thought about the first time Ed had those thoughts, sitting in his basement. The first times Ed still held onto his morality and dispelled those thoughts, however tempting they were, denying that they brought him a sense of satisfaction. Then he imagined Ed confronting himself, admitting that he liked the idea, admitting that it sounded like something he could do, and soon Ed began writing the red notebook and building the bombs. And now he too faced a similar decision. He could do it or refuse to do it. He couldn't deny that it sounded tempting. Buzz's punches and laughter hammered in Christopher's mind, the allure of being noticed. The psychologist's stupid advice and her coldness made Christopher clench his fists, trembling and sweating. I can kill them all. This will be the craziest school shooting they've ever seen. A bombing. They'll all die just like they should have 26 years ago, all die as they deserve, and I'll be remembered forever. Ed too. I can do this for Ed. He won't be a failure who almost made it anymore. He'll be the seed that made everything happen when no one expected it. His heart screamed. He stopped those thoughts. Every last bit of morality and belief in human nature slowly pulled him away from the train of thought, making him realize how terrifying they were. He stood up. He walked out of his bedroom, leaving the red notebook on the desk. He walked through the living room where his mother was drinking on the sofa. He walked outside, closing the door behind him, breathing in the cold air. I can't do it. I know I can't. What was Edward Faust's plan for Garrick High? I know the police have hidden most of the story, but does anyone have any informed opinions? Sender, at Urgel. Best answer: Edward was truly brilliant. He built bombs that even the military said were powerful enough to kill everyone in Garrickhigh's buildings A, B, and C if he lived and placed them. The small bombs found were reportedly intended to be placed in the lockers of people he disliked, and when they detonated, he would trigger the large bombs. The news didn't mention much, but 2 weeks before Edward died, the exact list of all locker codes in the school and who owned them was stolen, and it's possible that was Edward, so he could place bombs in the lockers of people he hated. He also had a shotgun he intended to use. He would wait in Building D and shoot at people fleeing the school. He chose Building D because it was undergoing renovation at the time, and only a few exits were available, which would concentrate fleeing students and teachers, making them easy targets. The red notebook contained plans like these. Sender, at Conspiracy Realist. Damn it, Christopher nodded. You guys guessed pretty accurately. Perhaps you don't even know how close you are to the truth of what he intended to do. He had read every page in the red notebook related to the day of the Garrick shooting and decided to look up Edward Faust's name and conspiracy theories about the event just to see what people thought. He felt like he knew the answer to whether aliens or the Loch Ness Monster were real. And even though it was a terrifying topic, he couldn't deny the thrill of knowing things that people online tried to find but failed. The first part is completely accurate. He stole the list of all locker codes. He could open any locker in the school. He built 18 small bombs, 5 medium-sized bombs, and 3 large bombs. The 18 were placed in the lockers of 18 students he targeted, and the 3 large ones were placed in buildings A, B, and C, specifically the north side of Building A, the west side of Building B, and the east side of Building C. This was to ensure that when the bombs exploded, anyone who survived would only be able to escape through Building D, because the main exits of Building A were to the north, Building B to the west, and Building C to the east. But you forgot that these bombs were napalm bombs, and they would create fire of such high intensity that there would be no other way out except the south side of Building D. All other exits would be covered by a sea of fire. The part about Building D is mostly correct. It was undergoing renovation and had only 6 exits in the entire building, 4 of which would be destroyed by the initial explosions. He did not have a shotgun. He had a Colt AR-15 Commando and a Colt M1 and was very proficient with them. He trained at the shooting range 3 days a week for almost a year before the day he died. Oh, another interesting fact. He planned to carry out the attack on May 1st. Anyway, he also placed 5 other bombs in strategic locations in the parking lot to kill panicking students and police officers. The plan would unfold as follows. At 12 p.m. on Friday, Edward planned to sneak out of class. Throughout that hour, he would go back and forth from his car, bringing in the bombs and placing them in the lockers. Each bomb was placed in a different backpack. He planned to carry each backpack in one by one so that if anyone saw, they would just think he was wearing a normal backpack. He was so ignored that no one noticed the backpacks weren't his. When all the bombs were placed, they would be wired to detonate if moved. He knew they would detonate at different times, and some might never detonate, because when the first few exploded, his other targets would flee the school. Nevertheless, he still placed all 18 bombs for fate to decide which of them he would kill directly. The 3 largest bombs were scheduled to explode at 1:01 p.m., 6 minutes after the 6th period ended, immediately after the first few bombs detonated. He would then begin shooting survivors. The bombs in the parking lot, mostly hidden in trash cans, would be triggered at 2 p.m., when police and students would congregate in the parking lot. He also planned to record the entire event with multiple video cameras placed around him and in the parking lot, which he had prepared early that morning. The link you posted is fake. Those pictures are scary, but they are not images of the real red notebook. It's very easy to tell because Ed's handwriting is very distinctive, bold, black, and angular. Anyway, if you're wondering how I know all this, it's because I have the real red notebook, but I guess you'll never really know if I'm serious. He clicked the post button. He wondered how many people would read it and know the truth, but then dismissed it as just a prank. Christopher walked down the hallway. A week had passed since Ed told him to read the red notebook. He hadn't heard anything else from Ed since then. He had wrestled with the thought of whether to carry out the plan. Deep down, as ashamed and haunted as he was by it, he had to admit that the idea was genuinely tempting. But just because he hated most of the people at school and knew they despised him, he wasn't going to be like Ed and abandon his humanity. He wouldn't lose his mind and become a monster. So he continued to live, still bullied, sometimes hated and ignored, but never succumbing to temptation. However, he couldn't bring himself to destroy the red notebook. Owning it was both terrifying and exhilarating. It told a story that people always wondered about with undeniable truth, and being one of the only people on Earth to know the truth was an intoxicating feeling. He couldn't throw it away, but he also knew it wasn't over. He knew Ed was watching, waiting for his answer. Sometimes he worried, wondering when Ed would appear. Then Buzz entered the hallway. Christopher tensed and tried to escape, but Buzz quickly approached, elbowing him in the stomach. Christopher looked up, horrified, as Buzz hit him, then shoved him into a locker with a triumphant laugh. "Long time no see," he grinned widely. "Have fun in there, I'm sure you missed it." Christopher's eyes widened. A horrifying dread enveloped him as he thought that Ed might reappear now that he was locked in the locker. "Please," he yelled at Buzz, "please let me out, I'll give you anything." "Whoa," Buzz turned back, walking towards the locker. "Are you that desperate, suddenly scared of the dark?" "Buzz," Christopher whispered desperately, "please just let me out." Buzz was silent for a moment, then Christopher heard his chuckles. Soon, he burst out laughing. "Not one more day, not one more hour. I will be heard, I will." "Please." "You're such a wimp," he laughed loudly. "Not one more day, not one more hour. I will be heard, I will." "Buzz," Christopher trembled, overwhelmed by fear. He felt Ed coming. He knew that as soon as Buzz left, there would be silence, and then he would hear footsteps. Soon, the light on the locker would be blocked, and there would be breathing outside. "No," he yelled, banging his hands on the locker. "Let me out, let me out, let me out, you bastard." "Whoa," Buzz recoiled, seemingly surprised. "Christopher, what the hell are you doing?" "Let me out," he screamed, pounding hard on the locker. "Calm down, you idiot. A teacher will be out here any minute." Buzz began to turn the lock, and Christopher fell silent, gasping. Then the sound of the lock turning stopped. What the hell?" he heard Buzz whisper, his voice weak. "What's wrong?" Christopher knew what was happening. He knew his chance to escape was over. He sat back in the locker as Buzz's footsteps echoed. He had run away. A series of other footsteps sounded softer. Something was standing in front of the locker. Inside was complete darkness. Christopher knew who was waiting for him on the other side of the locker door, mere inches from his face. It was the gaze of a serial killer, breathing the same air as him, a reanimated corpse. Those pupils piercing through the metal were Ed's. "They locked you in here again, huh? Don't worry, you'll make them pay." Ed waited for a reply. Hearing Ed's voice again made his heart tremble. He couldn't deny the strangeness of being respected by Edward Faust. "Have you read my notebook? What do you think, Christopher?" He was silent. "Ed, Christopher, I know you can do this. Remember everything they've done to you. Remember the way they made you feel. Christopher, you know no one else in this world cares about you, but I do." A piece of paper fell through the locker vent, and he caught it. "This is where I buried my gun and the key to my storage unit. The locker codes are there too. The locks have been changed, but everything is there anyway." Christopher said nothing. Ed stood motionless. The darkness in the locker still enveloped him. "I know who you are now. I've read about you, everything about you. I don't want to lie to you. It's brilliant, truly. And sometimes I wish I was capable of doing what you intended to do. But I know I shouldn't wish for that. I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't think about it. I can't shoot people. I can't blow up a school. I gave you my diary." Ed's voice was filled with anger, Christopher realized. It frightened him. "Christopher, I trusted you to do this. You're in the locker for the millionth time and you say you shouldn't hurt them? Really?" "I can't, Ed. Please leave me alone." Ed leaned into the locker, whispering furiously. Christopher only vaguely made out Ed's angry eyes pressed against the locker vent. "Why won't you do it, huh? You're here. You came back to Earth somehow. So do it then. Why me?" He looked directly into his eyes. He said nothing, just breathed slowly, unmoving, looking through his soul. Somehow, Christopher knew that he couldn't carry out the bombing himself. He knew there was some force restraining him. He looked straight into his eyes, trying not to look away. "Coward," Ed whispered. I trusted you. You're the only one who read my diary besides the damn cops. I trusted you. I haven't lost my humanity, Christopher whispered back. I won't do it. I'll never do it. Leave me alone, Edward Faust. I won't blow up the school. I won't show the world what would have happened if you hadn't died prematurely. I won't, do you hear me? I won't. The lock began to turn and Christopher heard the clicks. He was scared but held his composure as he waited for it to open. The lock fell to the floor. He waited for the locker door to open, but it didn't. Then light flooded the locker. Christopher considered opening the door when he heard Ed's footsteps walking away. He wanted to see his face, truly see him, but he didn't. Something in him pleaded, don't look at that sight. Anyway, if Buzz reacted the way he did, there must have been something visibly terrifying about Ed. He counted to 30. When he finished counting, he stepped out of the locker, but saw nothing. Christopher, what you did was truly brave. Detective Sanders shook his hand. I can't support anything like what Edward Faust intended to do, but I can't say he wasn't a victim, and neither were you. Most people in your position, they would do it, truly they would. But the fact that you didn't do it says a lot about you, Christopher. Christopher sat in the office, the blinds pulled shut, and he remained with the detective in a space completely isolated from others. Christopher said that every time Ed contacted him directly, it was from behind a locker, so he had never seen his face. The detective informed Christopher that the red notebook had been stolen a month ago, and the person who confronted Christopher, pretending to be Edward Faust, was most likely a known criminal known as the insurgent. This was someone who often committed acts of terrorism, but always through manipulating young people. He had never been caught, and even though he hadn't acted in 4 years, the detective assigned to catch him was certain this was his work. Christopher didn't know what to think. The location he received in the locker was indeed where the gun, locker codes, and key to the storage unit were kept. Both he and the detective were unsure how the insurgent had obtained that information. Leaving the detective's office, he was told that both sides would stay in touch. When Christopher reached his bicycle, he climbed on and cycled home. His family had left Garrick Town after the incident, under a witness protection program. Since then, the relationship between Christopher and his mother had improved. She was shocked to learn what had happened in his life, that he had been confronted by a serial killer and tempted to carry out such a plan while being so clearly ignored by those around him. In the new town, he had even made friends. However, sometimes at night, his mind would return to Ed. He wondered if it truly was Edward Faust. He knew he had seen what he saw on the day he caught a glimpse of him. It couldn't have been anyone else but Edward Faust, he thought. Buzz's description of the man was also strangely similar to Edward Faust's face, though Buzz explained that the man's face was completely burned and very terrifying. Detective Sanders explained that it was most likely just a costume intended to trick Christopher into believing it was the ghost of Edward Faust. Christopher knew it couldn't be the real Ed, it couldn't possibly be him. But sometimes, alone in his room, he remembered the poem, A Walk in Solitude, and the last 2 lines. Not one more day, not one more hour. I will be heard, I will. Those words haunted him. The way Ed reacted when told his poem was brilliant still remained in his mind. He seemed to feel honored. Christopher wondered if the insurgent could have portrayed Ed so meticulously. Oh, wait a minute, honey. Christopher cradled the phone between his ear and shoulder as he sliced bread and butter, simultaneously pushing his daughter, who was playing, off his leg as she tried to knock him over. Daddy, Margaret, his eldest daughter, laughed loudly, bouncing up and down by his leg, trying to get his attention. When is lunch ready? Soon, Margaret, he smiled. Daddy's just talking to Mommy to see when she's coming home. Be patient, okay? Yes, sir, she sighed, while her 2 younger sisters made dramatic pouting faces. Daddy's too silly, he laughed loudly. Now leave Daddy alone for a bit so I can hear Mommy. Hey, he smiled into the phone again. Sorry, Margaret's hungry, Amanda's hungrier, and Alice thinks we're playing football or something. He laughed because all morning she had been trying to headbutt him. He heard her laugh through the phone. I miss you and the kids. I miss you too, honey, Christopher smiled peacefully. Is Colton still okay? Teething badly? Christopher laughed loudly. But he has been sleeping more lately, which I don't mind at all. Anyway, when are you coming home? Saturday, right? Saturday, my love, she reassured him. This news story is crazy. Just covering the Davenport riots has kept the whole news team busy, and they're spreading. She yawned. I just want it all to be over so I can come home and hug you and sleep for hours. Ashley, he smiled. I love you, I can't wait, I mean it. The kids will be at Eric's that day. We'll spend the whole day in bed together, I promise. Perfect, she sighed in relief. Remember, I told them already. If these riots aren't over by Saturday, I'm coming home anyway. No one can stop me because my son is teething, my daughters miss their mom, and you're trying to chop down daddy and need mommy to rescue you. Christopher beamed. I can't wait, wait a minute, I have another call. He looked down at the caller ID. His heart stopped. Ashley, I have to call you back. What's wrong? She sensed the seriousness in his voice. It's Sanders, I have to take this call. Oh, I understand. I love you, Christopher. I love you too, honey. Goodbye, my love. Goodbye. Long time no see. What's going on, Detective Sanders? Christopher, I need to tell you something. First, how are the kids? Very good, Ashley's great. Now tell me what's going on. Find a private place. Christopher walked outside. Daddy, you forgot lunch will be ready soon, my love. But Daddy needs a little privacy right now, okay? Okay, she sighed. He walked onto the porch. Tell me what's happening. Christopher, I'm warning you. This is something you might not want to know, and if you don't want me to say it, I won't. I'll hang up, and you can forget I ever called. Sanders, I've lived with things I'll never forget. Every day I endure one more thing. Tell me. The insurgent has been caught. He was caught. Is there a problem? He's not a he, Christopher froze. I'm sorry. It's a woman, Christopher, a petite woman. How did you not know that? Everyone she approached committed suicide after their terrorist acts, usually while carrying them out. We assumed it was a man. You were the number one reason we thought it was a man. But now other people have reported being victims of hers. They refused her, and all described the same short, red-haired woman. This suggests not only that it's a woman, but that she never disguised herself with these people, not once. So she wouldn't disguise herself with me, and she couldn't. That voice was a man's voice. No woman could have a voice like that. Both were silent. No one spoke for a long time. They're not bothering you anymore. Just remember that, whoever they are, they're gone. They don't know you're living in Tennessee now, so don't let this bother you, okay? One day, we'll find out who he is and... Okay, both were silent again. Anyway, Christopher, I have to get back to this paperwork. Honestly, it was good to hear your voice again. We'll keep in touch. You too. Christopher leaned against the railing, looking out at the yard. He took a long breath and shook his head. It had been a long time since he had felt the sensation of being locked in the locker with that breathing outside, that gaze piercing his soul. But the feeling washed over him. Enough. Edward Faust, you're dead. You're gone, and that's all that matters. I don't care what happened. You can't harm me or anyone else. If you could, that school would be ashes already, and that's all that matters. It's time to bury this. He sighed, looking out at the yard one last time before stepping inside, closing the door behind him. Hey, kid, a boy yelled, pounding on the locker wall. Let me out, scared of the dark, Milton? The group of boys outside teased. Such a loser, enjoy an hour in there. Please, he panicked. I'm claustrophobic, please. The footsteps receded. Milton breathed heavily, trying not to panic. His entire body trembled as he weakly called for help. Then he heard footsteps. Hey, he yelled. Help me, please. The footsteps came closer. Please, he pleaded. The kids locked me in here. I'm claustrophobic and afraid of the dark. And the light from the vents on top of the locker suddenly went out, black as if someone was standing right in front of it. Milton held his breath as he peered through the vents, trying to see who it was. Who? Someone? Who's there? He asked, trembling. For a long time, there was no reply. Then a piece of paper was pushed inside. Milton almost caught it. A second later, the faint light from the locker returned, and Milton opened the paper, his heart pounding. Don't you get tired of it? They bully you constantly, but I understand. Ed**. Milton's hands trembled as he looked at the strange handwriting. He looked at the paper for another long moment before putting it in his pocket. Now his mind was racing, trying to remember if there was anyone named Ed in his class.